Hi, everyone. This is Nick DePaula, Assistant Professor at the School of Information Sciences here at Wayne State University. I'd like to welcome all of you to our first major event of A Green Street with Lori Pinson. I'm checking my clock and it's 1:01, and I would just like to wait 1 minute. I see some people are still coming on to let people arrive. So let's just wait about a minute to let people come on, and we'll begin more formally.
The video will be, or the recording will be available on our YouTube. I see a message. We'll be able to send it out via our newsletter, or you're free to check out our YouTube channel at Warrior Sustainability online, where we've posted all of our previous videos for green streets in the past, and we will be posting for the future.
Some comments on logistics for people who are here. So feel free to add any questions you have as we go through the presentation, and Laurie will address them as we go along. So you may feel free to add your questions to the chat. So I think it's we can get started now. I would like to welcome Laurie Pinson with us, who will be presenting on a review of weather hazards in a changing climatology. Lori Pinson is an award-winning meteorologist on Fox 2, providing weather Friday and Saturday evenings. She holds the American Meteorological Society's Certified Broadcast Seal of Approval and the National Weather Association's Seal of Approval. Pinson's graduate work includes studying at Johns Hopkins University for Environmental Science and Policy. And we would like to kindly welcome Lori Pinson today for talking to us. And I will let Lori begin her presentation at this moment.
Thank you so much there, Nick, and thank you. Oh, I see that silent clapping. Thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to be able to share some knowledge with you, speak with you today. I became interested in whether attending school in the Detroit winters, playing in Detroit winters with knee-high snow, and being that child, I always was, why is this happening? So now I am a meteorologist back in my hometown, able to share my knowledge with you, kind of full circle. So today we're going to do things a little bit different. Instead of a straight PowerPoint presentation, I'm a pretty visual person. So the topics that we're going to address, I put them together in video form. And what I'm hoping that we'll do is we'll watch the video. If you have any questions for me, put them in the chat. We'll discuss it a little bit after the video, and then we'll proceed on to the next one. Sound good? So why don't we get started? And I'm going to share my screen, and I ask you to indulge any technical difficulties that we may incur. I'm used to that in television, things happen. Okay, so let's share a screen here, and let's get to our first graphic. So here's our agenda. We are going to be talking about the weather and a changing climatology, 4 topics that I was asked to address. One, the Earth obviously is heating up. We're going to discuss that, how that affects you, what you need to know. Excessive heat, how is that a hazard? Ground level ozone is another thing that we're going to discuss. In typical summer, we have maybe several air quality alert days. Why does that come about? Is it from fine particulate matter, or is ground level ozone more so the hazard that we need to watch out for? If you live in Southeast Michigan, you know this past summer, you were wondering, should we build an ark? We've had so much flooding, so much rain, what we call training, when it rains consistently over the same location. We'll talk about that. And finally, we're going to talk about the hurricane season. We had predictions at the start of the season from several organizations. We'll talk about that and see how we ended up with that. And does climate change have anything to do with that? All right, let's get to our first video. And let's see, give me a second here. All right, here we go. Earth is getting warmer. Take a look at our range of temperatures over a 2-week period. Pay close attention to the departure from normal. Going back farther into our summer, there were several stretches of prolonged heat. According to the 2020 Global Climate Report from NOAA National Centers for Environmental Information, every month of 2020, except December, was in the top 4 warmest on record for that month. A report by the Global Change Research Program says multiple lines of independent evidence confirm that human activities are the primary cause of global warming over the past 50 years. Even a small temperature departure from normal impacts life in so many ways. It's in the news every day. More heat waves and droughts, heavy rain and flooding. Your weather is impacted. Out of tornadoes, hurricanes, and flooding, extreme heat is responsible for more weather-related deaths. According to NOAA, 138 lives were lost between 1990 and 2019 due to excessive heat. That's 138 deaths each year based on death certificates. Heat could be a silent killer, exaggerating and contributing to other illnesses in the body. Extreme heat can harm the brain and other vital organs. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, more than 11,000 Americans have died from heat-related causes since 1979. Our cities bear the brunt of the heat. Concrete and asphalt absorb heat during the day and take longer to release that heat at night, a phenomenon known as the urban heat island effect. According to the National Weather Service, urban areas can be as much as 22 degrees hotter than surrounding rural areas, providing little relief from the heat with low temperatures in the 70s and sometimes 80s overnight. Everyone is susceptible to heat exhaustion or heat stroke, but the elderly, infants, and children and outdoor workers are among the most vulnerable. The combination of high heat and humidity levels, known as the heat index, can bring about heat stress. Your body may no longer be able to cool itself because perspiration can evaporate from skin into humid air. Continued sweating could lead to dehydration, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. Monitor the forecast. When dangerous heat is imminent, the National Weather Service will issue excessive heat watches and warnings. Watches mean get prepared. Warnings mean take action. Here are some tips from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Don't rely on a fan as your main cooling source. Try to stay in air-conditioned buildings as much as possible. Drink more water than usual. Don't wait until you're thirsty to drink. Wear loose, light-colored clothing. Limit your time outdoors in the heat of the day. Peak summer heating is usually from 2 to 4 p.m. Exercise outdoors early. Take plenty of breaks if you work outdoors. If the Earth continues on its current warming trend, NASA's Earth Observatory says storms, floods, and droughts will become even more common. As sea surface temperatures rise, hurricanes may become stronger and of longer duration. Sea levels may rise, producing more coastal flooding. Hotter summers could lead to higher levels of ground level ozone. We'll address how that could directly affect your health in our next video segment. Okay, so does anyone have any questions in relation to that? I'm checking chat and I don't necessarily see any. Well, let me just say this. Interestingly enough, last year we were about to break records for record heat. Well, last year at this time, November of 2020 was the 4th warmest on record. So it started November 4th with temperatures in the 70s and extended through November 10th at about 77 degrees. And this particular summer that we just passed through, it was the 9th warmest on record. By comparison, last year was the 11th warmest, but you know, it's not going in consecutive order because 2019 didn't even rank as far as warmest of anything. And 2018 was warmer than the 9th warmest. So it's just our temperatures have been all over the place, but there's no denying that we are getting a bit warmer. I'll move on then to the next thing, because our next topic actually corresponds with hot temperatures, more so ground level ozone cooking underneath the sun. And so this is really a problem for folks that have upper respiratory or bronchitis. Let's go ahead and share that story for you.
Daryl has a quick question.
Okay, Daryl, go ahead while I'm doing this. Go right ahead. Daryl?
I put it in the chat, but I wanted to know just a little more of the warm stretches of weather. And we've had like really heavy rain as well. And I was just wondering how those two, as far as changes, I mean, are there any correlation between the warm stretches and the rain periods, that the overwhelming rain that we've received this year?
Yes. So warmer air holds more moisture, and therefore we get more rain out of it. That was really significant with Hurricane Ida, which we'll talk about in a couple of segments down the way. But as the air heats up, it holds more moisture. We get more flooding, in particular, and we're going to get into the flooding. In June, when we initially went into all the flooding that we had in here, we really were starting out in a drought. But the ground just became so overly saturated due to, we had a subtropical air mass in place. So it was holding tons of moisture. Our dew point values, which we look at the value of our water vapor values when they're in the 60s and 70s in the summertime, it feels really uncomfortable. So we were leading into that early June time with a lot of moisture in the atmosphere. Then along comes an area of low pressure and a stationary boundary, and that just exacerbated things. We just kept getting, again, what we call training, or the raining in one area over and over and over again. And it seemed to continue like every 2 weeks. So that pattern was in place definitely for us. It was a wetter pattern as things were attacking us or coming at us from the south. So to answer your question, Daryl, yes, warm air mass holds more moisture. When it lets go, in this case, the trigger was an area of low pressure that was very slow moving, and the boundary just remained stationary, and it just kept raining over the same area over and over and over again. And really, when you have a forecast like that, there's not a lot you can tell people other than, you know, that cliche, turn around, don't drown. But no one wants to hear that when they're, you know, looking at their basements that are flooded. But there's really nothing we can do about that. There's just a lot of rain associated with it. Lakeshore flood advisories based on the wind direction. And again, that wind was strong coming out of the south and east for the Lakeshore flood advisory and warning to be up. So to answer your question, a warmer air mass does contribute to higher rainfall rates.
Which is, since it's warmer now, that's why, I mean, because it keeps, you know, raining like this week. And it seems like this is a little warm for October.
It is. Actually, October's average temperature should be about 66, 67 degrees. And we have topped out with temperatures in the 70s. I mean, you know, who's complaining about that? But you're right. What it does then is it puts more moisture in the atmosphere. Another thing that happens too, you know, especially this week, it may be a gray day and then you see a couple of peaks of sunshine. You're like, yay. No, that sunshine makes the atmosphere more unstable, which then in turn triggers more storms. And there we have that same situation going into play again.
Thank you.
Oh, no worries. All right, so let's talk about ground level ozone and air quality alerts. They fall in line with excessive heat. Let's see, how is that possible? Well, let's go ahead. Two components contribute greatly to air pollution. Fine particulate matter consisting of dust, soot, ash, or wood smoke caused by burning fossil fuels or other chemical processes can be inhaled and absorbed into the bloodstream. Despite its microscopic size, fine particulate matter can damage respiratory systems and accumulate in the brain. Ground level ozone is another contributor to smog. More on that in a moment. Both pollutants can become trapped close to the surface, what we see and breathe as smog or pollution. Under normal conditions, warm air near the surface will rise as long as the surrounding air is cool. But when that rising air encounters warm air above it, the air will not rise any further. This traps pollution near the surface. For this discussion, we'll concentrate on ground level ozone. This is different from the ozone in the stratosphere, located roughly 7.5 to 31 miles above our surface. Ozone here protects us from the sun's harmful UV rays, which could cause sunburn or skin cancer. Ground level ozone, found in the troposphere closer to Earth's surface, is created by chemical reactions between oxides of nitrogen and volatile organic compounds. This happens when pollutants emitted by cars, power plants, industrial boilers, refineries, and chemical plants cook under the sun. Ground level ozone reaches unhealthy levels on hot, sunny days, especially in urban areas during high traffic times. The EPA monitors pollutant levels daily. When they become excessive, an air quality alert day is issued. An air quality alert day simply means the air may be unhealthy for you to breathe. We start at code orange for high levels of ground level ozone. If you have respiratory concerns, limit your time outdoors. Code red days means the air is unhealthy for everyone, with sensitive people feeling more serious effects. Since ozone may cause the muscles in the airways to constrict, symptoms could include coughing or a scratchy throat, along with difficulty breathing, exaggerated in the age of COVID, aggravating lung diseases like bronchitis, asthma, and emphysema. During these episodes, limit your time outdoors, wear a face mask. If you have asthma, keep your inhaler handy. Not only does elevated levels of ground level ozone affect humans, tropospheric ozone can harm vegetation during the growing season. Forests, parks, wilderness areas can suffer under prolonged exposure to high levels of ground level ozone. We can limit the amount of chemicals that help ground level ozone form by carpooling, combining errands or reducing them, refueling your car in the evening. The idea is to minimize emissions. If you use a gas-powered lawnmower, take a break until the evening. These small steps go a long way toward minimizing ground level ozone. So hopefully you have a better understanding of what ground level ozone is and how it can affect you, especially if you have some breathing problems, some upper respiratory problems, very young people, elderly people. It starts or feels like it could be a cough. I wondered if it were odorless. And in researching this, it said that you could actually smell ground level ozone, that it had a smell like burning wires. So I thought that was interesting. Does anybody have any questions in reference to that?
As a runner, because I run outside a lot, I find that like particularly disturbing.
Yeah. You're like, something else is out there waiting to get me. Well,
Oh,
I would think though that if you were running, you would probably run in the early part of the day. Ground level ozone really cooks in the afternoon, between about the noon and 4 o'clock time frame, when the sun angle is highest. And when we're getting more so into the heat of the day, those chemicals are cooking at the surface. I really ran into this more so when I was the chief in Baltimore for about 9 years, and that corridor, 95 corridor, was constantly a cause of concern because there was a lot of traffic, a lot of exhaust. If cars are running, buses are waiting to pick up kids and they're just sitting there running, and that exhaust is something that it doesn't dissipate in the air. It sticks around and we're all breathing it. So just a couple of the little tips that I shared with you, they seem like they might be minor, but they really do go a long way if everybody did that. I'm sure it's inconvenient to wait till you don't want to be running your car on fumes and, oh, guess what? I can't come to work because I have no gas. But if you did wait just till dusk when it doesn't have an opportunity to cook underneath that sun, that does make a difference. If you were, I always tell folks when it is an air quality alert day, take a break. Don't have to work out in the garden with that lawnmower, especially if it's running on gas. Even gas grills, wait a little bit before you grill. All those emissions help to contribute to the formation of ground level ozone.
Interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome. No worries. All right.
So
So
we have
sorry.
a couple
Okay.
more questions
Oh,
here.
sure.
I think you addressed one of them, Laurie, but somebody else is asking about the rain smell, if that's ozone.
Yes,
connected already.
that's a good question, because again, in researching this, not only did it say that ground level ozone had a metallic smell, but a lot of times people are confusing that, hey, it smells like rain. In reality, that is a ground level ozone smell.
Oh my.
So that's just something that you can be aware of. And, it doesn't, I guess I showed you the different colors there. Each color corresponds to how unhealthy the air is. So obviously, if we're getting into reds, or I've never seen it. Well, once I think I saw a purple, which is really like, just stay home. Then that happened again over out east. But it gives you an indication. So pay attention to that. We almost always start with orange, which is for folks that are sensitive to being outdoors, maybe have some breathing problems, are using an inhaler. But code red is a heads up for everybody, because it's like everyone could be affected in some way. If you're going running and you suddenly feel like, wow, I'm kind of wheezing, my chest feels a little tight, it could be from ground level ozone. It could be that. So those are, we just want to prepare you. And it doesn't always only happen, though it's rare to happen in the colder months. It could, but most likely this happens because it takes time for those chemicals to just cook underneath the sun. I know this past summer we had 2 days in a row that were air quality alert days. Easy to tell what those days will be. We had temperatures that were in the 90s. We had a lot of moisture, or what we call the dew point, when they're in 60s, 70s, or high levels of high relative humidity. So a lot of moisture in the air, a light wind. So it's not moving things around. Things are just kind of cooking there at the surface. And normally that wind is coming out, it's out of the south. So it's like a tropical air mass. And that's when an air quality alert day is issued from the Environmental Protection Agency, who monitors where our levels are. I take them seriously, mainly because I worked with it a lot out east. But here, I just don't know if people take it seriously enough. It's not like we live in Denver, where they have those temperature inversions and air is smoggy all the time out there. But here, it just bears watching, because if you do have those concerns, and I'm sure everybody knows someone older, or infants or toddlers, they shouldn't be out in the atmosphere. They shouldn't be outside in something like that. So I just wanted to throw this in. I was talking to Nick about it, and I have never really heard about that. And I just thought it was something that, especially if we're discussing heat, it's just something that kind of goes hand in hand with it.
I got a quick question. So right now we're revised. Well, we have several groups working on our sustainability plan. And so we are looking at one of our groups is looking at the built environment of the campus. And so in our green standards, we discuss the limiting VOCs in our construction materials. And so I guess I find it really interesting, once you hear, I see here the correlation of VOCs, and then the
volatile organic compounds.
Yes, yeah, and then with the nitrogen and the mix and the challenges that they can create. So I guess it's more of a statement than a question, but I find that this is all interesting, because it kind of brings full circle, some of the work that we're currently discussing, and integrating air quality into the mix. I think that this is something that we'll have to explore a little bit further. So this is very timely, and I appreciate you talking about.
Oh, no worries. I think just in discussing it, hello everyone, breathes. We all need clean air, and this is just another element to add, again, specifically in the summertime because of how ground level ozone is formed, but definitely something to work on year round in reducing those chemicals.
Mhm.
It was easy to find the video of factories spewing, smoke and burning fossil fuels. And obviously with the fires out west, we have more particulate matter that is, making its way. We did forecasts that showed where smoke was that was coming at us from the west. So no one lives like in a little vacuum and you're like, the air is not in my ear. The air is constantly circulating and moving, and we all have to breathe it. And what someone does out west, what someone does south or north of us, everybody is affected by it. So I think what you're doing is great if you're trying to limit those things, those components. It can only
Absolutely.
help to make things better for everybody.
That's the plan.
That's the plan.
That's the plan.
Okay, we're gonna move on then. So we talked about that heat is the #1 weather-related killer. Second up is flooding, and we had quite a bit of flooding to deal with. Again, killing more people than you would think with tornadoes, hurricanes, lightning. Of course, hurricanes take a long time to actually form, so we have a little bit of time ahead of time. Tornadoes coming from severe thunderstorms, we try to give you advance warning of what's going to happen with that. Lightning strikes, folks can be struck by lightning, but flooding is what is our second major cause of death. So let's take a look at that. Bear with me.
One can argue that hurricanes are nature's most powerful
Of course, the
storm.
wrong one pops up.
In the Atlantic Ocean, hurricanes are formed from thunderstorms moving off the west coast of Africa, feeding off ocean water with
I'm
a
going to go ahead
minimum
and let
temperature
that
of
play,
80 degrees
and then I'll
Fahrenheit,
just come back
with a
to
lack
the
of
flooding
vertical
one.
shear above it, allowing the storm to grow. This low pressure may eventually develop into a tropical depression with wind speeds less than 39 miles per hour. As the storm gets stronger and winds increase to more than 39 miles per hour, it becomes a tropical storm, and for identification purposes is given a name. With wind speeds faster than 74 miles per hour, depending on geography, a typhoon, cyclone, hurricane is born. Hurricane strength is defined on a 1 to 5 category scale that estimates property damage. Although fatalities and wind damage can occur during any of these 5 categories, hurricanes reaching category 3 or higher are considered major hurricanes based on their potential for loss of life and structural damage. The eye of the hurricane is comprised of rising and sinking air, surrounded by the storm's most powerful thunderstorms. Breaking the structure of the hurricane into quadrants, the right front quadrant is considered the most dangerous. Torrential rainfall and deadly storm surge as the hurricane nears landfall accounts for numerous fatalities and widespread damage. Although Michigan is far from the tropics, we track the storms and bring you live reports from our correspondents. Hurricane Dorian weakening overnight into a category 3 hurricane, but it continues to batter parts of the Bahamas and still remains a threat to the southeastern U.S. Fox's Ray Bogan joins us live from Cocoa Beach, Florida. Ray, what are conditions like at this hour?
Lori, good morning. So all morning we've been experiencing conditions very similar to what we experienced yesterday, and that is some wind and some on and off rain. But the storm is expected to start making its way north today, and that could bring a lot of rain with it.
All of these components were acting in overdrive during the 2020 hurricane season. According to the National Hurricane Center, 2020 featured 30 named storms, 14 of them transitioning from tropical storm to hurricane strength. This montage from NOAA's satellite shows them all. To recap, although hurricane season begins June 1st, 2 storms formed early in May of 2020, and the storms kept coming. In the month of November, 2 powerful Category 4 storms formed, making 2020 the only year that ever occurred so late in the season. Last year's Atlantic hurricane season was so extensive, the names allocated for the storms were all used, resulting in the use of the Greek alphabet, a practice that's been retired for 2021. Roughly 416 fatalities were attributed to the 2020 hurricane season, with total damages around $51 billion. La Nina, a natural climate pattern bringing cooler than average water temperatures in the Pacific, was one of the contributors to the active 2020 hurricane season, mainly because it weakens the vertical wind shear in the Atlantic, allowing hurricanes to strengthen. Since sea surface temperature is such a factor in the development of hurricanes, does climate change play a part in an active season? Matthew Rosencrantz, Hurricane Season Outlook Lead at NOAA's Climate Prediction Center, takes on the question.
Sure. So climate change has not been directly linked to the frequency of named storms, tropical storms, but it has been linked to an increase in intensity of storms. So once they do form, they have a possibility to get to those category 4 and 5 storms to get that intensity level up. Climate change is also linked to heavier precipitation within storms, about 3%. That's about the estimate for that we've experienced through at the current time. Also, sea level rise can make coastal areas much more prone to the flooding, and that's taken into account with our great work on the probabilistic storm surge.
Which brings us to 2021. For this season, hurricane experts from Colorado State University predicted 18 named storms, 8 becoming hurricanes and 4 major hurricanes. That's category 3 and higher. Tropical storm risk predicted 18 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. Here's NOAA's Ben Friedman with their prediction.
NOAA's outlook for the 2021 Atlanta hurricane season indicates that an above normal season is most likely. Specifically, there is a 60% chance of an above normal season, a 30% chance of a near normal season, and a 10% chance of a below normal season. For the range of storms that we expect, the outlook calls for a 70% probability in the following ranges: 13 to 20 named storms with top winds of at least 39 miles per hour. Of these 13 to 20 named storms, 6 to 10 will become hurricanes with top winds of at least 74 miles per hour. This includes 3 to 5 major hurricanes ranked as categories 3, 4, or 5, with top winds of at least 111 miles per hour.
Laura Gacious, media spokesperson with NOAA, elaborates.
Several climate factors that are conducive to increased hurricane activity, including the ongoing high activity era that has been in place since 1995, are reflected in this year's outlook. We're now experiencing ENSO-neutral conditions with the possibility of a return to La Nina later in the hurricane season. In addition, warmer than average sea surface temperatures in the tropical Atlantic Ocean and Caribbean Sea, reduced vertical wind shear, weaker tropical Atlantic trade winds, and an enhanced West African monsoon all contribute to the outlook for this season's above normal activity.
So far, our 2021 reality has been 20 named storms, tied with 1933 for third place as the most active hurricane season. There have been 7 hurricanes, 4 of them major, bringing torrential rainfall, dangerous storm surge, tornadoes, flooding, and death. Once again, the hurricane season started before the designated June 1st timeline, with Tropical Storm Anna in May, prompting the National Hurricane Center to issue tropical updates for the first time prior to the season's start. Typically, hurricanes peak in September, but June was the most active month on record, with 3 named storms forming in 1 month. Hurricane Elsa was the earliest forming E-named storm on record, beating out last year's stat. A warmer atmosphere holds more moisture, increasing the threat of inland flooding. Who could forget Hurricane Ida, a Category 4 storm, the most intense and destructive in Louisiana since Hurricane Katrina, bringing catastrophic flooding to the northeast. Hurricanes Larry and Sam are known for their longevity and strength, 11 days for Larry, 13 for Sam. We're reaching the end of our designated names for 2021. With over a month left in the season, there's still a possibility for more named storms to develop.
Okay, I have a question for you guys. when this video started on my screen, it showed that it was moving, but on my husband's, it was not. Did everyone see the beginning of this? Because if not, it's really important that you saw how things formed. Can anybody answer me?
I did not see a video.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Then I
Yeah,
want,
it started with the Ray Bogan.
okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. Sorry about that, but I knew things like this would happen. Oh.
It's time.
Technology in any meeting can be a blessing and a curse, so I totally understand. I believe it's muted now.
Laurie, can you hear us? Now it's muted. Maybe she cannot hear us.
I can try the chat really quick. Maybe it'll pop up.
Geography, a typhoon,
Oh, okay.
cyclone,
Hold on a second.
hurricane.
You said you couldn't hear it?
One can argue that hurricanes are nature's most
There you go.
powerful.
Now I hear it.
In the Atlantic Ocean, hurricanes are formed from thunderstorms moving off the west coast of Africa, feeding off ocean water with a minimum temperature of 80 degrees Fahrenheit, with a lack of vertical shear above it, allowing the storm to grow. This low pressure may eventually develop into a tropical depression with wind speeds less than 39 miles per hour. As the storm gets stronger and winds increase to more than 39 miles per hour, it becomes a tropical storm and for identification purposes is given a name. With wind speeds faster than 74 miles per hour, depending on geography, a typhoon, cyclone, hurricane is born. Hurricane strength is defined on a 1 to 5 category scale that estimates property damage. Although fatalities and wind damage can occur during any of these 5 categories, hurricanes reaching category 3 or higher are considered major hurricanes based on their potential for loss of life and structural damage. The eye of the hurricane is comprised of rising and sinking air, surrounded by the storm's most powerful thunderstorms. Breaking the structure of the hurricane into quadrants, the right front quadrant is considered the most dangerous. Torrential rainfall and deadly storm surge as the hurricane nears landfall accounts for numerous fatalities and widespread damage. Although Michigan is far from the tropics, we track the storms and bring you live reports from our correspondents. Hurricane Dorian weakening overnight into a category 3 hurricane, but it continues to batter parts of the Bahamas and still remains a threat to the southeastern U.S. Fox's Ray Bogan joins us live from Cocoa Beach, Florida. Ray, what are conditions like at this hour?
This is where we
Okay,
kind
guys,
of,
so this
yeah,
is
this
where
is
you
where we
came
begin,
in.
Laurie.
You want me to continue to play this, or shall we go to questions?
I think it's okay to pause now.
That is some
Okay.
wind and some
Yeah.
on and off rain, but the storm
Yeah.
is expected to start making its way north
The
today.
sound keeps
and that
going
could
still.
bring
Yeah, I
a
hear the
lot
sound.
of rain.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, I think that was the part where we got it stopped, but that was good. I have a question. As you're just mentioning, do you think that this area over here is pretty safe from these kinds of hurricanes, right? But is it true that they are kind of starting to hit the northeast region more often?
Well, if you're referring to Hurricane Ida, are you referring to the remnants as it came up because Ida didn't hit the East Coast, it was affecting the East Coast from all the flooding. Or are you speaking of?
Oh, I see. I see. Yeah, I mean, either way.
Okay, so we just had Sam that moved up, and Hurricane Sam was very powerful, Category 4, and stayed out to sea over near Bermuda, but looked as if it were going to target the East Coast. The storm following behind it, Tropical Storm Victor, also formed off the Maldives and stayed farther on off to our east. It's rare that we see hurricanes actually impact Bermuda and then move up the East Coast. Most of the time, hurricanes follow the pattern of forming off the African coast and then moving in west to northwesterly fashion, eventually getting caught up in the Gulf, where the waters are so warm that they can redevelop. Sometimes maybe when they hit land, because a hurricane needs the warm waters to form. Once it goes inland, it's like taking the batteries out of a toy. It falls apart. But this season, a hurricane reformed after it hit land, hit Cuba, and then got into the Gulf, and here we are. It came back again. So to answer your question, most of the time the hurricanes take the path of either they're going over toward northern Mexico or they're going up into the Gulf. Surprisingly, it's rare that they even come over toward Tampa. They usually swerve on over there toward Houston, New Orleans, who thank goodness had shored up their levees. And then that moves inland and brings torrential rains down toward Alabama, Mississippi. Now, here's an interesting thing. Ida did not really impact us because we had a system that was already in place, and it was pushing it farther on down there to our south. So we had already had, high pressure, that we had a cold front that went through, and then high pressure came in place for us. And that actually suppressed or pushed Ida farther south and caused it to veer over toward the Northeast, where they got torrential flooding. So we were shielded from that. And that is a lot of times what happens when the hurricane makes impact or it comes ashore in the Gulf Coast area. It will move a little farther on over to the Northeast based on the weather pattern that we have over us. We had a great day. We had high pressure clockwise pushing the system farther on over to the Northeast away from us. And very rarely do we get a lot of that moisture. Now, we could get the influence of the tropical air mass in place, which in turn, if we get rain, which could be triggered off by a cold front, it might be heavier rain. But a lot of times that low pressure, which is what a hurricane then becomes after it loses its tropical characteristics, it just becomes an area of low pressure. Sometimes it's to our south, and like Adrian, South Monroe, Flat Rock, Temperance, those cities to our south would get more of that rain.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No worries. I just wanted to say it was good that you jumped into hurricanes instead of flooding, but this video was actually an update. I originally put it together for a webinar I was doing for the National Science Teaching Association at the beginning of the hurricane season. But what I found that was interesting when I went back to update it was that both the Colorado State and the TSR both changed their predictions twice within the season, where NOAA kind of stuck with, what they were saying. They had their range. And I thought that was interesting. And the reason why they did that is because they were waiting to see if a La Nina would form, which formed and really made last year's, the 2020 hurricane season, very active. So far, it hadn't really formed, although we've had several storms, tropical storm names and hurricanes come from this season. So far, we haven't delved into the excess names that have been added in, not the Greek one. And no scientist is really saying that hurricanes are directly impacted by climate change. But I guess the other thing about that is that we've had some folks say, or we can't definitively say that it's impacted by climate change, but we can say that the things that present climate change, like more moisture in the atmosphere because it's hotter, that makes the storms bring more flooding or the potential for more coastal flooding. So even though there might not be as many storms that would develop especially if we continue in this global warming pattern. The storms that do develop are a lot stronger. They slow down, and that makes them impact areas longer. They have that training effect, bringing the potential for flooding, widespread flooding in. The storm surge is higher. So those are things that are taken into effect. I had like Jim Colson from the NOAA Climate Change says that hurricanes are moving slower, and that forward movement means that there's more rainfall and potential for destruction. So we see that when those larger hurricanes form, it's that they become more destructive. So that's just something to keep an eye on. I thought it was an interesting summary of how everyone got to the predictions that they did eventually land on for 2021. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. Let's try to go back then to our flooding. This is going to come up when we talk about flooding. And actually, these terms can be applied to pretty much any weather hazard. You'll hear us say severe thunderstorm warning or watch, or tornado warning or watch. All we're trying to do is to get you to be prepared. A warning means, hey, you know what? This is happening in your area right now. You need to take action. A watch means I'm preparing and I'll be taking action if it becomes a warning. And an advisory and an outlook just lets you know that the situation could be there for either flooding, severe weather, possibility of lightning. Severe weather is issued, or severe thunderstorm warning is issued when winds could be in excess of 60 miles per hour and there's a potential for hail. So let's go ahead and talk about what's going on with sharing my screen. So we have one more video. Let's see if we can get to it. Okay, here we go. It's coming. I have to tell you that I'm usually not the one pushing the buttons, but I think we're going to come through this okay. Okay, here we go. All righty. Oh, this just disappeared off my screen. And it is buffered.
This was the scene in Detroit less than a month ago. Massive flooding following a 7-inch rainfall. Cars stranded, freeways closed.
I have never seen anything like this, ever. And driving through it is scary.
Weeks after Detroit's freeway flooding, heavy rains saturate the ground again.
Working for you. This is Fox 2 News at 5.
Here we go again. Another rainy summer day leads to widespread flooding. And once again, Wayne County is the hardest hit.
So we are not done yet. That flood warning that's up for Wayne County is expected to expire at 5:15. Flooding definitely imminent in that area. But as we take a look at our expected rainfall, many of you have received anywhere from 2, even 3 inches of rain. On top of that, as we go on up through your early Saturday morning time frame, you'll notice on down near the border, they're picking up a bit more rain. But this is on top of the rainfall that you have already experienced. Flooding is the second leading cause of weather-related fatalities in the United States, surpassed only by summer heat. Floods kill more people each year than tornadoes, hurricanes, or lightning. The National Weather Service estimates the annual average number of flooding deaths has increased from 81 to 95. Of course, there are exceptions to those statistics. 2015 recorded 189 flood fatalities, the majority of them male. 2016, 186 fatalities. 2017, 180. By contrast, 2020 recorded 59 fatalities, perhaps because many of us were staying inside. Still, you get the point. Many flood fatalities could have been prevented by simply turning around when confronted with fast-moving water. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration defines flooding as an overflowing of water onto land that is normally dry. This abundance of water can occur after hard rain, excessive spring snowmelt, dam or levee failure. Wind direction can play a part. Lakeshore flood advisories, watches, or warnings are often issued for Macomb, Monroe, and Wayne counties in Michigan, where strong northeast winds lead to higher water levels on the shoreline of Lake St. Clair, from St. Clair shores down to the Detroit River. In most flood fatalities, the power of water is underestimated, especially in the case of flash flooding. Flash flooding is the result of water rising rapidly in a short period of time. That's why it catches so many people off guard. Know these terms when it comes to flooding. A quick rule: warning means conditions are happening now, take action. A watch means conditions are favorable, get prepared. Flash flood warning. Flash flooding is imminent. Take immediate action to protect yourself and property. Flood warnings, two types: aerial and river flood warnings for specific forecast areas along rivers and streams. Take immediate action. Lakeshore flood warning. Lakeshore flooding is imminent or likely within the next 12 hours. Take immediate action. Flood watch. Prepare yourself. Issued within 36 hours of flooding. Lakeshore flood watch. Lakeshore flooding is possible. This watch is usually issued 12 to 36 hours in advance. Time to prepare. Urban or small stream or lakeshore advisory. Statements issued to give information on river or stream flows or ponding of water in urban or other areas. Use common sense. Don't navigate around road barriers or signs that warn about flooding. There could be washed out roads ahead. Why take the chance? Stay away from fast-moving water or flooded areas. It only takes a few inches of water to cause you or your vehicle to lose contact with the road. Get to higher ground if you live in a flood-prone area. If flooding occurs in your house, don't go into any room where electrical outlets or cords are submerged. If you're told to evacuate, leave immediately. Only if you have time should you disconnect utilities and appliances. Now, this one is obvious. Don't camp near a river if there's a storm threat. Respect the power of nature. During a flood, water can rise and move quickly. Be prepared.
Okay, so a lot of information in that. We were talking again a little bit earlier about the difference between the watches and warnings. Those are extremely important, especially when we talk about flooding, because again, we're trying to give you time to prepare yourself. When though we say that there is a warning, this is already happening in your area. I just want to I have a couple of notes on flooding here. You know, our precip records date back to 1874, and this September was the 15th wettest in history with a rainfall total of 5.43 inches. And this summer brought widespread flooding to Southeast Michigan, and it started June 25th. You guys might remember that. We were, and as I told you earlier, we were in a bit of a rainfall deficit, and it just really would not stop coming. We had, again, that strong cold front that moved through an area of low pressure that remained stationary, and it just kept raining and raining. And this combination produced 1 to 2 inch rainfalls within the hour, with Grosse Pointe picking up as much as about 8 inches of rainfall. Also, it resulted in widespread flooding and a tornado. I worked that night, so I do remember that. Then even again, about 1 to 3 inches of rain fell after that on July 16th. The daily precip record for Detroit was broken that day with a rainfall total of 2.2 inches of rain, and 3.5 inches of rain fell again on August 11th. So we've had a really tumultuous summer as far as flooding is concerned. And I think in talking to our viewers, the one thing that they constantly say is, you know, people want it to be hot, and of course folks complain when it is hot, but the main thing they remember about this summer is that there was so much flooding. And again, it goes back to warmer air mass holds more moisture, and we had consistently throughout the summer really high levels of moisture in the atmosphere. Again, that dew point, I can't stress that enough. I try to, when I give a forecast, say, and the dew point reading, and most folks are like, bloop, but instead of relative humidity, it gives you a really good advantage to understand how uncomfortable it is. Easy to see, 60s, 70s, it's an uncomfortable air mass, and there's a lot of water that's being held in place. So when we think about what's going to be the trigger to let that go, it's usually that time of the month. a cold front, a drier air mass, so switch in wind direction is trying to displace that warm, humid air mass in place. And that's when we get those storms. And when it's slow moving, that's when we get rainfall amounts 1 to 2 inches an hour, depending on what time of
Just to
year.
clarify, Laurie, so 1 to 2 inches an hour, that's bad. That's a lot of
That's a
rain,
lot of-
right? Because
that's
1
a
to
lot
2
of
inches
rain.
sounds very little, but that's actually a lot of rain.
That's a lot of rain, especially when, and I tried to give you an idea of, in this month, it was this and this and this and this. Starting in that June timeframe, people are trying to just, they had widespread flooding in their homes. They're trying to just get through it. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, we have another situation where there's flooding, cars are floating down the interstate, that we just don't seem to get a break. So what happens is the ground just becomes so saturated. Where's all that water going to go? It even happened again in time for our equinox. In September, we had heavy rains then, September 22nd this year. We had a strong cold front that came through. It brought 5 inches of rain to Oakland and Wayne County. So it's been that type of summer. And it's interesting that it stopped right at the beginning of fall, but we've just had quite a bit of rain. And I have to think that it's due to our weather patterns, getting more moisture from the south. Sure, that's going to happen in the summertime. A southerly flow is going to make it feel uncomfortable. This particular summer, as I said before, it's going down in the record books as one of the wettest in the summer. Does anybody have any other questions? We talked about the hurricanes and the formation. Again, how the example of more heat is making these tornadoes that spawn from the hurricanes themselves, more destructive. The other thing I wanted to tell you is that for the first time, the National Weather Service, during one of these flooding instances, issued a destructive severe thunderstorm warning. I had never really heard that term before. This is the first time it was used. And severe thunderstorm warnings, again, are issued when winds could be up to 60 miles per hour. You have the formation of hail. A destructive severe thunderstorm warning is when winds can be 80 miles per hour. Tropical storm strength is 74 miles per hour. So just kind of wrap your head around that a little bit. Also, the potential for hail forming, that has to be at least 2 3/4 of an inch large. So we've had some destructive weather come through here, some interesting weather. I think the flooding is unusual, and obviously it is since it's going down in the record books.
Great. Thanks so much, Laurie. Does anybody else have any final questions or comments or anything?
Laurie, I have one quick question. I have noticed that there are a lot more, 100-year storms happening, twice, maybe 3 times a year. Are there any official plans to make that, to change the wording around that, or are there any plans to, officially directly address the climate change that's pertaining to like the wording that we use around meteorology?
Are you saying that storms that are unusual, are we going to change the terminology when we address them? Are you referring to much like the example that I just gave you, where the storm is not just an average storm, it's what we're classifying as a destructive storm? Is that the question?
It's more of a general question. I've heard the term, of meteorologists, like when I was out in Denver a few weeks ago, and the meteorologist had said we're experiencing another 100-year storm, as in like we would normally only experience this once every 100 years. I didn't know if that was like an official word or like official term to describe.
I guess because it hasn't happened here, it's not a term that I would necessarily use, but you have to understand that in addition to climate change, our seasons are cyclical, and we do have some seasons or some years that are just naturally going to be warmer than others. And in those years that are warmer, and you put on top of it climate change, those years are going to produce storms that we normally wouldn't see. I think Daryl said earlier, is it warmer than it has been September? Has it? And yes, the short answer is yes. Our temperatures have exceeded where we should be for many of the spots that we looked at temperature wise throughout the summer. So I personally haven't had to say this is a 100-year or this is a first type, but from our perspective here in Michigan, the National Weather Service has designated different storms or seasons. For example, this past summer as the 4th wettest or the 9th wettest. It designates our storms in that way. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. Does anybody else have any other questions for me? Well, if you don't have any other questions for me, I just want to say thank you so much for allowing me to come in here and share this topic of conversation, which I dearly love and could talk about for hours. I want to say a special thank you to Daryl Pearson for inviting me, Nick DePaula for also working with me. And I have to give a shout out, in case he sees this later, to my boss, Kevin Rosepearl, for allowing me to come here and chat with you guys and to bring you some support. Listen, if you liked the videos that you saw, you can always go to our webpage, fox2detroit.com/weather. They're part of a weather blog that I do called Whether or Not. And also on there, if you know any young people or you have nieces or nephews or children that are interested in science, I also have another thing that I do in their video called Lori's Science Corner. And it's specifically targeted to young people to get them interested in science and math. And it gives you really fun experiments that you can do. I actually had my guy, I don't know if you can see him. He's been a part of all of our experiments as well. So I think that's pretty fun. That's at fox2detroit.com/weather. In there, you'll see it. And you can always follow me on social media. The conversation doesn't have to end here. On Facebook, Twitter, I'm at Laurie Pinson Fox 2. On Instagram, just simply at Laurie Pinson. So I thank you again for your attention and your opinions.
Thank you so much, Laurie. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for being here. Keep an eye out for the other Green Street events. I hope to see you there. And I think this concludes our talk for today. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Laurie.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.